All right. Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning devotions. We're back into Second Chronicles 32. This is actually our third devotion out of this passage. The the chapter is nicely divided into three sections, and we're in the third of those sections, which deal with the end of the reign of Hezekiah, this great king. It's episode 354, and so let's begin. We begin at verse 24. Now, it's interesting here that verse 24 to 33 is the end of the chapter, and they refer to what we read in 2 Kings 20. All right, so I'm just going to refer to that as we read through this, and it gives a little bit more detail than the chronicler does. Because again, the chronicler is trying to put Hezekiah in the best light. It's the true light, but he does not go into all the details. He just gives us like the highlights of Hezekiah's reign, and so we need to keep that in mind when you read the book of Chronicles. It is a very optimistic book, all right, because you again, it's the last book in the Hebrew canon, and going into the 400 silent years. Everyone wants to be reminded that Judah and Israel are God's covenant people. And so that is accented here. So let's look at verse 24. In those days, Hezekiah was sick to the death, which is what it says in 2 Kings 20. It said, and prayed unto the Lord, and he spake unto him, and he gave him a sign. Now, in verse 24, one verse, if you look at 2 Kings 20, what he does is the prophet tells him, Isaiah says you're going to die. Hezekiah pleads with God to give him more life, and God gives him an extra 15 years. Okay, that is the content of verse 24 of 2 Chronicles 32. So he withdraws his death, all right, and gives him an extra 15 years, which is very significant. Because if you look at chapter 33, the first verse, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. That is, Manasseh is the son of his old age that was born to him in those those grace granted 15 years. And Manasseh is one of the worst, if not the worst king that Judah ever sees. So out of this 15 years that Hezekiah gets, a boy is born in his old age, which is Manasseh, which is just one evil, wicked boy, just terrible. And when we get to it, it's terrible. So, I mean, we have to read into this because the text doesn't tell us. But the idea of having kids late in life is probably not a great idea, because dads need to have enough strength left in them to keep their sons in check, because boys grow up and get strong, all right? And it appears as if Manasseh here didn't learn anything from his dad, that his dad was interested in other things, and he has a son, but his son was just on his own. Now, I'm reading into all of that, but there's nothing about Manasseh here in the beginning that gives us any indication that he was going to follow in the tradition of his father, all right? He's born in that extra 15 years. And it also says here, he prayed unto the Lord, and he spake unto him. That is, he gives him the extra 15 years. And it says, and he gave him a sign. That also is interesting. You'd think that this might have been included. But in 2 Kings 20, verse 9, Isaiah says, what do you want a sign? You want a sign that you're going to live these extra 15 years? And he says, you want to see the sundial go forward 10 degrees or backward 10 degrees? And Hezekiah says, well, to go forward isn't a big deal because that's the normal course of nature. But if you can make the sundial go backwards 10 degrees, then we'll know it's the hand of God, and the sundial goes back 10 degrees. All right? And when I went through that before, when I went through that in 2 Kings chapter 20, the issue comes up among the commentators of whether or not the sundial went back 10 degrees just for Hezekiah, that it within that region, or it was an actual reversing of the movement of the earth. All right. And I said back then that it was a regional thing, and I'm backing up on that a little bit, because God can do anything, and it doesn't have to be according to the rules of physics. Okay, all we know is this: whether it's either way, all we know is the sundial went back 10 degrees. That we know, because now we have people saying, well, we found those 10 degrees, and all of this, which is very fascinating and everything. But the point is, that is what confirmed the fact he was going to live another 15 years. All right, that's all in verse 24 of 2 Chronicles 32. So let's press on here. He goes on in verse 25. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him. This is the other thing we see about these kings when they get a little older. It's like when they get a little older, they get soft, and that's a lesson for all you out there that have gray hair, for all the grandpas and grandmas out there, or those that are older. What we note here is they start getting soft as far as their allegiance to God when they get old. David got into trouble when he should have been out to battle, all right, but he wasn't strong enough even to go back to the battlefield, and that's when he's home, when he should have been on the battlefield, and had time, that free time on his hand, which got him into trouble. So the idea that once you get a few years under your belt and that you're gray-headed and that you're out from underneath the temptation of the adversary and that your old man is dormant and that the world doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, I have stories. I have one story about an individual who's up in years that it was just you would not believe it happened, because you have to stay in the fight. The point is, you have to stay in the fight till you're dead. That's what I'm saying. My dad told me that when you get older, you think maybe the devil will lay off and maybe you've won your victories and there'll be a time when you can just kind of glide. That time never comes for us. Never. There's never a time for gliding. You always have to keep your gloves on. You always have to be in the fight until they close the lid on that coffin, or the rapture. That's it. And there's no way around it. Just because you're up in years doesn't mean the devil says, well, we're going to check Pete off because he's gray-headed, or whoever you are, just check their name off because they're pressing through their years. That doesn't happen. All right. So, and that's why, remember I said I used to use little old ladies as an example of godliness? Remember I said when I was younger, I used to say the little old lady because it conjures up this soft, tender, benevolent kind of thing. But in real life, that doesn't. There are the true, faithful, benevolent, wonderful, just generous, gracious little old ladies. But there's also those who are little old ladies that are just as mean as can be. And you know what I'm talking about. So, no, it never stops. It never stops. So, that's what we're reading here in verse 25. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefits done unto him. He's departing from the Lord now, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore was the wrath upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. So what does it? His heart is lifted up. He's full of pride because he's rich, he's accomplished, he's done so much. And remember what I said? After that happens, you begin to think that you did it. When up until this point, he's recognized that where he is because of the grace and mercy and wonderful blessing of God. He knows that until we get to this portion of Scripture. And his heart is lifted up, and now he thinks he's the one that's actually pulled this off because he's getting soft in his old age. And then the wrath of God is upon Judah and Jerusalem. Notwithstanding, verse 26, notwithstanding Hezekiah humbled himself of the pride of his heart. You see, now we got a correction. He humbles himself, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. There's more yet to come. That's one instance right here. In verse 27, we're going to talk about how God blessed him. And Hezekiah had exceeding much riches and honor, and made himself treasuries of silver and for gold, and for precious stones, and spices, for shields, for all manner of pleasant jewels. The guy was immensely rich because of the blessing of God. What happened prior to this is he's looking at all this. He's saying, man, I really did it, instead of saying God did it for me. All right. If you're ever a millionaire, remember, I'm your friend. If you're ever a millionaire, remember the reason you are is because God did it. That's what I'm telling you. If you ever come to the place where you're on easy street as far as the world's concerned, when it comes to riches and those things, just remember when you lay your head on your pillow, thank God that the reason I'm in this condition is because you did it for me. It's the grace of God. It wasn't me. It was you. It did it for me, and I thank you, Lord. There you go. And so he recognizes this. Verse 28, storehouses also for increase of corn and wine and oil, and stalls for all manner of beasts and coats for flocks. I mean, he's got he's got storehouses full of everything. He's just building more barns and more barns. The Lord's blessed him over and over and over, which ties in with what we've been saying, that if you serve God well, trust him, he fights the battles for you. He defeats the Assyrian army by way of a miracle, and the blessing is overwhelming. It's the heavens, the windows of heaven are opened, and it's demonstrated here in the life of Hezekiah. And then it goes, verse 29, moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him substance very much. And there you have. And when the Bible, I have to chuckle at this because we say very much. How would you like? I like very much. But when God says very much, it's like understated. When God says it's very much, how much is it? When you say it's very much, you have an idea of how much it is, but it's not God's very much. God's very much is like off the charts much, right? When you read these things. When God blesses, it's not just a little bit here and a little bit there. It's blessing, all in caps, bold with red letter, right? Blessings. So it says very much. And then it talks about some of the things that Hezekiah did. He's an architect and an engineer as well. It said, and the same Hezekiah also stopped the upper water course of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David. That is, it's an aqueduct that he builds, which is very cool back in these days. So he's getting water coming into Jerusalem from another region, from Gihon, so it doesn't have to be drawn from a well. I mean, and you know the Romans were big on this. I mean, and really it goes all the way back to Ur of the Chaldees. They were already doing this. It was out of that city, which was very modern, that Abraham was called by God to leave a city of modern accommodations for that time of our culture, of the world, and go and live in a tent in the wilderness of what's going to be the promised land. and he did, and that wasn't a problem. He always lived in a tent, and he sought a heavenly city. You see, he knew he was going to live in a permanent place, but he didn't see the benefit of the blessing. That's a little bit of Abraham there. So, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. Okay, verse 31. This is another setback, which in 2 Kings chapter 20, it takes up verses 12 through 18 of what he does here. And Isaiah gets after him, like says, why are you doing this? And I think it's just one verse here. He says in verse 31, howbeit in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon. Remember, I said those gigantic nations in the east, Assyria and Babylon, because Assyria is going to be off the charts now, but Babylon is going to be the one that destroys Jerusalem in 586 BC. It's the first in Daniel's prophecies of the world empires. It begins with Babylon, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, and then the Romans are the four ancient world empires. All right, so this is the first. So ambassadors from Babylon who can stomp all over everything, who have an army that can't stop, who in the end are going to have 3 deportations out of Israel, which is where Daniel and all of the 3 Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are taken, when Ezekiel is taken, and finally the city is destroyed in 586 BC. You can't stop them because, and this is because, you know, in the book of Isaiah is trying to tell the people that they have to repent and return to the law and return to Jehovah, and they don't. I mean, it's Isaiah is one of those books where he preaches his whole ministry, and at the end of it, nobody pays any attention, or not enough to matter. All right, for all those that think that every time you preach, you should see some positive movement, or if your church isn't growing, nothing happened under the prophet Isaiah, and he was well educated. He was an amazing man, but It was set. It was set because of their rebellion against God and what Moses had already written in the law. Because they had abandoned Jehovah, the Babylonians were coming, and they did. Here is the beginning of it. The ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land. All right. What he does, if you look back in 2 Kings chapter 20, is he shows everybody, he shows all these Babylonian ambassadors the riches of the kingdom. He's saying, look at my gold, look at my jewels, look at the farmland, everything I just said that God had given them in abundance very much. He shows it all to the Babylonians, and the Babylonians are just going cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Well, I'll tell you, if we're going to come and take some place, we're coming here because the reign of Hezekiah has made Judah so rich. Jerusalem is so rich. When it's time to take over a nation, we're just coming to Jerusalem because they are loaded with everything. You see, he's not thinking like that. He's not thinking like the people that he's showing are going to rob him, destroy him, and just take it. And Isaiah, back in 2 Kings chapter 20, chews him out, says, what in the world are you doing? Don't you know who these guys are? And he repents of that. Okay, back in 2 Kings 20. But it's too late. He shows them everything. Listen, there's times not to show people nothing. I mean, just act ignorant or just, divert it. It's not their business. They are going to be an invading army that he just showed how wealthy he is, and they've got the power to come in and take it, and they do. I'm glad the Bible is here. There's so many lessons that we can learn from this. We get in trouble because we talk too much or we want to show people things that they should not see. And I'm not talking illicit things. I'm just talking about things that tell more about you than you should let them know. That's what the book of Proverbs is about. Be prudent. All right? Keep your mouth shut and shake their hand and talk to them at the door. But it doesn't mean you got to invite everybody in so they can see your house, or you can show them some of the things that you've accumulated. Don't do that. I mean, I had a neighbor across the road. He was really good about this because the Lord had blessed him, and the one thing he had a restored hot rod from the 60s, and it was gorgeous. He didn't get it out all the time, but just beautiful. It was packed away. Nobody hardly ever even knew he had it, because once people know you have something, and if they have some desire to take it, I mean, they know where it is, right? No, you just keep things private is the point, okay? I mean, they're yours and for your family, all that, but not everybody needs to see this is the point, especially an army coming from the east, all right? So that's what he does. Anyway, Isaiah chews him out. He repents of it, which brings us back to the last two verses. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his goodness, and see, in spite of all of this, the chronicler wants you to know, just like with David, and he's a man after God's own heart. He is the premier model of a king, is David. And Hezekiah, in spite of this, is noted for his goodness. You see, that's why when we go about evaluating our own lives, you got to be really careful. Because we read this stuff, as I said, when we went through Kings, we read this stuff and we come down really hard on these people. But we have to wait until God measures everything. In your life, in my life, I mean, we know what the Bible says. I'm not talking about anything apart from the scriptures. I'm just talking about the way you evaluate yourself, because I'm sure what's going to happen is some of the times, and I'll just speak for myself, I came out of the pulpit and I said, man, that was a great message. Probably in heaven they were going, boo, boo. And then sometimes I came out of the pulpit and you're just dragging and you're saying, I don't know if I even got it across, and you go home a little despondent because it's not always even. And in heaven, they're rejoicing. That's what I'm talking about. The way we see things is not the way God sees things. All right. So it says he's good. And his goodness, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah, which is in the book of Isaiah, the prophet, the son of Amos, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel, which is 2 Kings. So we have other records of what Hezekiah did. And verse 33, last verse. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, was buried him in the chiefest of the sepulchres of the sons of David. the chiefest, the top sepulcher of the sons of David. All right, because he's in the lineage of David, and right at the end, who is he identified with? He's identified with David. That is who is the model king. All right, that's the connection you want to see at the end, and it's the chiefest of the sepulchers of the sons of David, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death, because they understood who he was. All right, this is Hezekiah. He is an amazing man. That's what you need to remember. He's good. He's in the tradition of David. He's buried in the chiefest of the sepulchres, and all of Jerusalem, Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor. They said he was a great king. And then the last line here in verse 33 is this: and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. We're going to go from the top to like the bottom with Manasseh, his boy. And the first thing it says that Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. And I'm going to stop there. We'll start that tomorrow. All right, on Friday. Yeah, man, Manasseh, terrible. I got to tell you one thing, though. Manasseh, as you read the account, he gets saved. I'll just throw that out for you. He gets things right. He's wicked, but even the most wicked people can be saved. The Apostle Paul, who destroyed and persecuted the church, got saved. He was Saul, and his name was changed to Paul. Doesn't matter who's out there. The grace of God can reach them. All right. Okay. That's it. I guess that's it. It's Thursday. What do we got? June 4. And yesterday was my son's birthday. All right. And so my first son, Pete. And anyway, big day there. And I guess that's it. So, all right. Well, the Lord bless you, and you have a great day. And Lord willing, I will see everybody tomorrow. Okay, we'll see you. Bye.